Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our Kubernetes Masterclass today. We are just getting situated. I'm gonna give a couple minutes for everybody to get online and logged in. So while we're doing that, I'm gonna do a quick intro before we dive into our presentation. I am Connie Lynn. I am the manager of global events here at Rancher. And today I am joined by our amazing software engineers, Rajashri and Luther, and Kinara. Rajashri and Luther will be doing our presentation demo today, and Kinara will be online as well to help answer any questions that you guys have. So just a quick overview of our masterclass today. It'll probably run around 45 minutes, and then we'll hold the last 15 or so for Q&A. If you have questions throughout the session, I encourage you to pop them into the questions tab on your GoToWebinar platform, and we will do our best to answer them along the way or at the end during our Q&A session. Also, this masterclass, excuse me, is being recorded, and we will be sharing the recording and slides in the next day or so. So if you needed to refer to anything, all the info will be shared. We also have a Slack channel for all things masterclass. If you would like to join, head over to slack.rancher.io, pop in your email, and then join the masterclass channel. We also offer several different online training options. Obviously, today is our advanced online training, the Kubernetes Masterclass. We also offer an intro to Kubernetes and Rancher training. The next session will be tomorrow at 1 p.m. So head on over to rancher.com/training to sign up and check out all of our upcoming courses. So just a quick overview about Rancher before we dive into the presentation. If you're not familiar with us, we have a big portfolio of products and open source projects. Today we'll be focusing on Rancher, our new 2.4 release, but I encourage you to head to rancher.com to check out all of our offerings. And here at Rancher, we are here to help you be successful at running Kubernetes at scale. And just want to quickly go over how we do this. We do this by tackling two key pillars. The first of which is that Rancher supports any certified Kubernetes distribution. We offer RKE for on-premise workloads and also support all the major distributions in the public cloud. The other is centralized management. Our flagship product, Rancher, is the most widely adopted Kubernetes management platform. So that takes us into our topic today, which we will be diving into the upgrades and rollbacks of our latest release, Rancher 2.4. So with that, I will hand it over to Rajashri, and we can get started.
Hey everyone, good morning. I'm Rajashri, and in today's session, I'll talk about how 2.4 onwards, Rancher can perform zero downtime upgrades on Rancher provision clusters. Now, Rancher launched clusters includes both the RKE clusters that you provision using an infrastructure provider as well as a custom cluster. When you're creating a cluster through Rancher, you have to assign at least one of these three roles to each of the node. The roles are etcd, control, and worker. And based on which role you have selected for each node, Rancher installs the corresponding Kubernetes components. So for example, for a node marked as etcd, it will install etcd, and kubelet and kubeproxy are installed on all nodes. Then for a control node, we install kube API server, controller manager, kube scheduler, and kube API auth. And of course, on the worker also, there's kubelet and kubeproxy. Along with that, Rancher also installs a few more components that are used to manage the nodes and the cluster further. For example, the cluster agent, node agent, nginx proxy. And another crucial part is the system add-ons. For instance, the networking plugin, like the networking add-on, is installed on all nodes. Then DNS and ingress add-on is installed on the control and worker nodes. And metrics server is also installed on the control node. Sorry, yeah. Now, among these Kubernetes components, I just want to talk a little more about these three. The Kube API server is the front end for your Kubernetes control plane. When you do a kubectl request, that Kube API server is what will respond back to you. So it should be active for a successful kubectl request. Kubelet is what manages the user's application pods. That's why you need kubelet running on any node on which you're going to deploy applications. And kubeproxy is what maintains the network rules on nodes via IP tables. So looking at all the components that Rancher installs, like the Kubernetes components as well as Rancher components, let's see how a cluster would get upgraded in Rancher versions prior to 2.4. So the upgrade starts with the etcd plane, where the etcd plane is upgraded on all etcd nodes, one node at a time. It is then followed by the control plane nodes, where we upgrade the kube API server, kube controller, scheduler, and the other Rancher components. Now, for the upgrade of control plane, at the most 50 control plane nodes get upgraded at a time. Again, this is for a cluster before 2.4. Usually, it's like clusters don't have as many as 50 control plane nodes, so it ended up being almost in parallel. For the worker nodes, we upgrade kubelet, kubeproxy on all three nodes, etcd, control plane, and worker. This flow was a little different, like it's a little different for a Rancher provisioned RKE cluster versus a standalone RKE CLI cluster. Now, for a RKE CLI cluster, at the most 50 worker nodes would get upgraded at a time. Whereas for a Rancher cluster, all worker nodes get upgraded. And for a standalone CLI cluster, add-ons get upgraded only after the worker nodes upgrade is finished, whereas for a Rancher RKE cluster, it happens simultaneously. So in a nutshell, this is the cluster upgrade process in versions prior to Rancher 2.4, where the etcd plane is upgraded one node at a time, followed by the control plane, 50 nodes at the most at a time, which is almost in parallel, followed by all worker nodes getting upgraded and add-ons getting upgraded one at a time. But the add-ons and worker nodes upgrade happens simultaneously for Rancher provision cluster. Let's talk about what happens to some of the Kubernetes components during this upgrade process. So Kube API server that is running as a part of the control plane. Since the control plane nodes get upgraded like almost in parallel, it is possible that if some parameter of the Kube API server is wrong, or if something goes wrong during the upgrade, it can take down the Kube API server component on all control plane nodes, which means your connectivity to like how you make requests to the Kubernetes cluster itself could be would stop working. Then there's kubeproxy. When upgrading kubeproxy, we stop the old kubeproxy container and start a new one, which resets IP tables, which means the communication between nodes could go down if this happens for all nodes at the same time, and something like for a brief period, the communication would go down. which means we were not experiencing zero downtime upgrades, because for a zero downtime cluster upgrade, you would want the Kubernetes API to be available during the entire upgrade. Like there are many use cases such as CI/CD workflows, which should be functioning throughout the entire upgrade. Users' workloads should keep serving traffic without interruption. So to achieve zero downtime upgrade, the most crucial step we took is, instead of upgrading nodes in parallel, we perform a rolling update of nodes to ensure that the applications are always running. During this rolling upgrade, we cordon each node, and optionally, we also drain the node, meaning user can choose to drain or not drain the node, but each node will get cordoned right before the upgrade, and then we uncordon it. And after this entire upgrade goes through, we check that the node is has come up properly with the new components, and only then it is marked as upgraded or active. And only then we move on to the next node. So this is the cluster upgrade process starting from Rancher 2.4 onwards. We first start with the HCD plane on HCD nodes. It again happens one at a time, followed by the control nodes where we cordon and drain the node optionally. Then we upgrade the control plane components on these nodes, followed by the worker components, and then we uncordon the node. Now, after that, we upgrade the worker plane on HCD nodes and on worker nodes. So again, we cordon and optionally drain the node, upgrade the worker plane components, and uncordon the node. And for a Rancher cluster, simultaneously, the add-ons will get upgraded one at a time. So the networking add-on gets upgraded first, followed by DNS, monitoring, and then ingress. So no, like 2.4 onwards, no matter every time you do a cluster upgrade, it would be a zero downtime cluster upgrade, but you can configure the upgrade according to your use case if you want. So in order to configure this upgrade, you can specify some parameters. One of them is the max unavailable parameter. So like the name suggests, it specifies the maximum number of nodes that can be unavailable at a time during upgrade. If at any time the number of nodes that are unavailable during upgrade exceeds max unavailable, then the upgrade would stop. This max unavailable can be provided as an exact number or a percentage of nodes. The default value for worker nodes of max unavailable is 10%, and it can be changed through the UI. I'll show that in a minute. Like in the UI, you can go under the advanced options to set it, or you can edit it through cluster YAML, or also it can be changed through API. And the default value of max unavailable for control plane nodes is 1. Now, we didn't expose this option in the UI, and it can only be edited through API because we strongly recommend using the default value of 1, because that is how you will achieve zero downtime upgrade. But for some reason, if you need to change it in your cluster, you can edit it through the API. And apart from the rolling update of nodes, you can also configure the upgrade strategy for your add-ons. So the networking and ingress add-on are deployed as daemon sets. So if you want to configure their upgrade strategy, you can now pass the same, or you can now configure the same parameters that you would for a daemon sets upgrade strategy, which is the max unavailable field. Then the DNS and monitoring add-ons are deployed as are launched as Kubernetes deployments. So they can be configured, like their upgrade strategy can be configured using max unavailable and max search. Apart from that, the DNS and monitoring add-ons, since they are deployments, you can configure the scale as well. So you can scale up the number of pods that are launched for these add-ons so that they stay available during upgrade. This is the link to the docs that shows in detail how you can configure each of these parameters. And now I'll move on to, oh, actually, sorry, yeah. So these are some of the requirements that must be met by a user cluster in order to achieve zero downtime upgrade. So the number of nodes, for instance, HCD nodes, like each cluster should have 3 or more HCD nodes, then 2 or more control plane nodes and 2 or more worker nodes. Also, these are some of the best practices for deploying your application. So you must scale your application on multiple nodes and set liveness and readiness probes for your application pods. Okay, now I'll head on to the demo. Yeah, so this is my Rancher launched cluster, which is on Kubernetes version 116. And over here, I have 3 HCD nodes, 3 control plane, and 3 worker nodes. I have also launched a sample workload, and I have an ingress exposing it. So, sorry. Yeah. Now let's say it's time to upgrade the Kubernetes version of my cluster. So I click on Edit Cluster. Over here, I can change the version and set it to 117. Now, in order to configure upgrade strategy according to my use case, I'll scroll down further to the advanced options section. Over here, I can see that the maximum, over here, I can see that the max unavailable for worker nodes can be configured either as percentage, like I said, or as an exact count of the number of nodes. Along with that, you also have the option to drain your nodes during the upgrade. By default, this will be set to false, but if you want to drain, you can set that to click yes. And you can also configure how your nodes get drained during the upgrade. For instance, what happens to the pods that were launched outside of a deployment or a daemon set, or pods that are storing data, what happens to those pods, that you can configure that over here. Along with that, the grace period for pods termination and drain timeout can also be set. I'm just going to leave it with whatever default values have been set for that. So this was under the advanced options. If you scroll up and go to edit as YAML, you can provide the same values over here via YAML as well. So there's this new key for upgrade strategy, where again, you can set the max unavailable worker. And this is where you can set the max unavailable control plane. Like you noticed, it's not exposed in the UI. Also, you can configure the drain here as well with these 5 fields. Now, the add-ons are also, you can also configure the upgrade strategy for add-ons through this cluster YAML. So for example, one of the fields that I spoke about was replicas. So let's say for a monitoring add-on, which is a deployment, you can configure the replicas here. Apart from that, the document that I have linked explains how the upgrade strategy for the add-ons can also be configured. Okay, now I'm just going to go back to this. I am upgrading my cluster to 117. In the meanwhile, like when the upgrade is going on, I am also going to run kubectl get nodes to just test how kubectl requests are working during the upgrade in a loop. And I said that I have launched a sample application. So I'm going to make a curl request to the ingress and see if my workload is responding, like if the ingress is responding to my request during the upgrade. Okay. So as you can see, the cluster is updating, and you can check the logs in your Rancher server, but most of the logs based on what step is going on will also show up over here. So first of all, it will pull all the images required for the new version, and then it will upgrade the HCD plane on your HCD nodes. At that time, you won't see anything different in the UI, meaning the state of the HCD nodes won't change to cordon or drain because we are not doing that at this stage. I'm going to start running these. Okay, so right now, since the update has just started, my ingress is responding and the kubectl get nodes call is also working. The update, it can take a little time, so just bear with me. And okay, right now it's in the pre-pooling Kubernetes images state. Yeah, so the order that we expect to see is basically HCD plane on all these three nodes, followed by the control and worker plane on these three nodes, during which you will see the state of the nodes changing to cordon. Now, although I had selected the drain option for each of the nodes, you won't see the state of the control plane nodes change to drain. You will see that happening for the worker nodes. Okay, like you can see, the control plane node has started upgrading, and maybe just for a little fraction of a second you can see this error, but mostly the upgrade will continue with kubectl requests being served and the ingress requests going through. So going back to the UI, what I was saying is you can see the state change to cordon, but just for the control plane nodes, the state won't change to drain because that is some custom logic that needs to be implemented in Rancher, and we haven't done that for do4. But don't worry, your node will get drained if you have marked that option. As you can see, this node, the upgrade for this node went through, so we picked the next node. And yeah, the requests are still going on. The reason we cordon each node during the upgrade is to make sure that no new workloads get scheduled on that particular node while it is undergoing upgrade. And now to the third node. So although the HCD plane on the HCD nodes got upgraded, we still haven't upgraded the kubelet and kubeproxy. Once the kubelet gets upgraded, you will see that the version also will change to 1.17.5, which has already happened for the control plane nodes. Once the last control plane node is upgraded, we Rancher will then move on to upgrading the worker plane on HCD and worker nodes. Yeah. So for the HCD node also, we are following the same process, cordon and drain. But again, for the HCD node, that custom logic of setting the state to drain hasn't been implemented yet. So you will only see the cordon state. Okay, that happened at least quickly. I think it will take another couple of minutes for the upgrade to go through. In the meanwhile, are there any questions that I should address right now?
Hey Rajeshri, there is one question then you can go over. So if
Mhm.
what happens if node has multiple roles? Like if a node has HCD and control plane node both,
Okay,
would the
yeah.
order change or how would it go with components?
So the order of the plane, in how we are upgrading each plane stays. Like the HCD plane will still get upgraded one at a time. But let's say it has control and worker roles both. Then when you're upgrading the control plane components, okay, it will pick the max unavailable that you have set for the control plane. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, okay. And coming back to the worker nodes, over here you can see that the state changes from cordon to draining to drained. And right now the actual upgrade is taking place. And the curl request through your ingress, the user application is still working. Yeah. Are there any other questions?
So there's another question, which is if there is any problem which is happening during an upgrade, where would you go and look? I guess there is Rancher server logs, but then could you also talk a bit about where could you go on each node, or how would you access each node's logs?
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, like you said, there's Rancher server logs, but I think you can. So to go on each node and check, like you can SSH into the node and check all these Kubernetes components are basically started as containers. So you can go on each of the node and check the logs of the Docker container corresponding to that Kubernetes component. Now I'm running a DigitalOcean cluster, like I can download the keys for each node from here. Once I SSH into that container, let's say this is a control plane node, so I'll see containers running for Kube API server, controller manager, and so on. And I can check the Docker logs for each of the container. Yeah. Now the upgrade has moved on to the second worker node. I think this will this will take another few minutes. So, but you get the point. Like this is how the rolling update of nodes will ensure that the upgrade is a zero downtime upgrade. If there are no other questions, then I'll stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Luther. Okay.
I think there was sorry, Rajashri, there's another question about should the cluster be backed up before the upgrade?
Yeah, I think, yeah, so that's the part that I think Luther is going to cover. Like if something goes wrong, how do you go back to the previous state? And yeah, like ideally it should be backed up. So
great.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It's exactly what I'm going to be going over. Thank you very much, Rajashri. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Hi, everybody. I am Luther Munson. As you just witnessed, Rajashri has demonstrated a full upgrade of a cluster with zero downtime, showed how they can do rolling cordons and drains and restart the nodes with new versions of Kubernetes. Now, what happens if that goes bad? If you have tried to upgrade a cluster and it did not work for some reason, or if you just don't like your changes, we support a lot more options today in 2.4 to do rollbacks. I will go over what that used to look like, but let's go first into a little bit of an overview of what our snapshots actually are, what they do, that kind of thing. This is a little bit of a blast from the past on what exactly we're doing under the hood, because this is all based off of RKE. So RKE is a tool that we have written, the Rancher Kubernetes engine. And what we are doing with RKE to do snapshots is essentially what you can do. What we're doing in the Rancher UI is essentially what you could do with the RKE CLI tool. There was an RKE etcd snapshot save and a snapshot restore functionality. This functionality let you do some very simple things. It would grab your etcd database and it would export it to the local file system, or it had options for you to point it to an S3 storage bucket, and you could use this to set cron jobs, things like this, to automatically download your etcd snapshots and then push them somewhere. This was an etcd data only tool. It was designed very much in the style of, say, a MySQL dump or maybe a Postgres dump, something like this. Grab a database, put it into a flat file, put it somewhere for storage, and then be able to get it back at some point. Very, very useful functionality for a database. So how did we make that better? So we needed to do easy multi-cluster snapshot management via the UI. We wanted to make sure that you could do everything you wanted to do inside of the Rancher user interface, and we wanted to make sure that that same RKE functionality was available to you via point and click, push button sort of thing. So we wanted to make it so that you could one click to create and do restores of snapshots, of etcd snapshots. So the Rancher UI would actually give you all of these options, the local versus S3 storage. That was the functionality that the CLI already provided. But on top of that, the Rancher management plane additionally gives you the opportunities to do recurring snapshots based on interval. So you could say every 4 hours, I would like to back up my snapshot, for instance. Sorry, back up my cluster to a snapshot. And then you could also do auto pruning. So if you were to say, I want to only store 10 snapshots after 10 of them, I would appreciate it if Rancher would delete them for me. So just some simple management sort of things that you would use as you were managing clusters downstream. You would be able to do this to every managed cluster from the RKE cluster that Rancher deployed. You can do it to any of them through the UI. It's very simple. So now, if you then had taken a snapshot, what would you do next, right? You would want to restore it at some point. Well, in pre 2.4, the ability to restore a snapshot was only the ability to roll back the etcd data, the under the hood, the real data inside the database. There was no ability to roll back versions. There's no ability to roll back any cluster configs. Some people know that as the cluster YAML. That stuff was not actually being tracked in the snapshots. So for the most part, I think that everybody would understand this best, where you would do exactly what Rajashree just showed you, where you would take a cluster which is on 116, you would snapshot it, and then you would upgrade it to 117, and then you would restore a 116 snapshot to a 117 cluster. Some people could imagine that restoring a 116 etcd database to a 117 117 Kubernetes cluster might not be ideal. So we started tracking the Kubernetes versions and the cluster configurations, and these are now stored side by side with the etcd database. This way, RKE as a tool was always able to take these things, and since we're keeping track of them via the snapshot, we can then pass them back to RKE to then recreate the downstream cluster into the original configuration for what it was at the time of the snapshot. So that gives you 3 different options now while doing a restore. The restoration type is now the parameter that we use when you are doing a restore. If you do an etcd only restoration, you are doing exactly like you were doing a snapshot restore in 2.4. That is the exact same thing. It's just etcd only, just database. You can do exactly what I just said, which is restore a 116 to a 117 cluster if you choose. However, if you'd like to use the more advanced features, we have the ability now to do etcd and Kubernetes version only. What this will do is change just the version Rajashree showed you in the dropdown as a Kubernetes version. I will also show you in my demo. That parameter will get passed back in, and that will tell the downstream RKE cluster which version of Kubernetes to go back to. So this way, if you were to have a 116 cluster that was upgraded to 117, you had a snapshot from 116, and you said restore etcd and the Kubernetes version, it would then restore back the original 116. And then additionally, the cluster configs are in fact things, the cluster YAML is a very long list of things that you can change within your cluster. And it's possible that you did an upgrade or you did something different. Maybe you even stayed in the same version of Kubernetes. Maybe you did 116 to 116, but you changed the cluster YAML and you still broke your cluster. That is something you could do. And we give you the ability to restore back to a point in time where that cluster YAML was functional. So you can take a snapshot, take as many snapshots as you want, by the way. There was a question, which was what, should we take snapshots before doing upgrade? Yeah, you should take a snapshot additionally before you're even changing your cluster YAML. I mean, if you have the storage space is not a concern for you, take the snapshots. We have them there for you to use to make sure that you have some place to go back to. And now that we store the Kubernetes version and the cluster config, it will make life a lot easier, even if you're staying within the same version of Kubernetes. And you can just go ahead and zero downtime upgrade and what we'd like to call atomic rollback. You can go back to the same version and the same cluster config. So let's show you kind of what that looks like. And I'll show you a little bit of the underhood stuff too. I am, after all, an engineer and a backend engineer at that. So this might get a little nerdy, but please ask questions while I'm doing this. I would be in a good position to show you, to answer those questions while I'm doing this demo. All right, what I have here, I will show you the quick overview. I have my local cluster. I'm running it on my laptop here locally on K3s. And then I additionally created a vSphere 115.11 cluster inside of a vSphere cluster. But if you can see right here, it is actually on 169. So I created it as 115.11. I know I did that. And I will additionally show you if I was to go here, go to vSphere, go to the Kubernetes version. That is basically all I did. I added a new cluster with 115.11 brancher 1-3. So when that cluster came up, I now have an active cluster. If you look at this cluster, I have one node who I have treated as the master node. He has all roles. He has etcd, he has control plane, and he has the worker. So if I was to look here on the list of nodes, you'll also see 116.9. However, I know that we have snapshots. I have taken these from when I created the cluster 7 hours ago to 20 minutes ago. And if you look at this and I say restore snapshot, you will see that that version of Kubernetes is actually embedded in this dropdown. And you'll see additionally that the older versions are embedded in this dropdown, which include 115.11 from when I created this last night. So if you go and say restore a snapshot 115.11, I will click that. And these are those options I was discussing. This would be the etcd is the exact same thing as from 2.3 previous. The etcd and Kubernetes version will restore the database plus this Kubernetes version. And the etcd Kubernetes version and cluster config will restore. I will show people for those who are not acquainted. Right here, if you edit a cluster, you can edit it as YAML. It is basically the contents of this. So you can put in things, anything you want. There's a lot of functionality in here that is under the hood, not actually done through the UI. A lot of people like to mess with the cluster YAML and get their cluster tuned exactly how they want it. But in progress of tuning your cluster, you might break it. So now that we keep those in the snapshots, it would be very easy for you to just go back, and now we will do it. This is going to be great. We're going to go to snapshots. I'm going to click one. Let's do this one. 6 hours ago. This should be 115. I'm going to do Kubernetes version and cluster config. And just for reference again, we are currently on 116. I go to the overview, you will see 116, and you'll see vSphere. I'm going to restore a snap. Oh, I took a snapshot. That was silly. I'm going to restore a snapshot. Of course, won't let me until it's done. That's a nice little demo too, right there, snapshot now. That's what you're looking for. They don't take long, especially on a one node cluster. So I'll just show you, yeah, see, it's already done. Wasn't very hard for us to take a snapshot. Seriously, if you're gonna touch your cluster YAML, touch your cluster at all, obviously that took no time. Make it a part of your process to just go ahead and take a quick snapshot. Now I'm going to go to this one, restore snapshot, etcd and Kubernetes, and we're gonna watch this. So, see, it's now updating. I'm going to go to my node. You're going to see this node is going to start disappearing and doing all sorts of weird things. Notice this IP. I have already downloaded the keys previous, which is right here. And I have my SSH ready. So I'm going to go into this box. I'm going to first use a real shell, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do watch on Docker PS. I did not type it right. Okay, so we're just going to watch this, and I'm going to talk about kind of what it's doing in the background. As Rajeshri mentioned, all of our features here are running inside of Kubernetes. They're running inside of Docker containers, and you will see as this thing refreshes and different things show up that we'll eventually have a node that will have his kubelets refreshed, and we should start seeing all sorts of interesting things. I'm gonna zoom this out a little bit. I hope you guys can still see it, but it does kind of give it a little bit better of a. So you can start seeing things refresh. We're gonna be looking for this cluster to start refreshing back down to 1. These things are gonna look a little scary. You might say, oh, goodness gracious, my cluster might never come up again. Give it time. Sometimes, you know, it's gonna spit out a bunch of errors. You are, in fact, this is not a zero downtime rollback, by the way. The zero downtime upgrades are a little bit more possible. We are going back in time to a place where we thought stuff was working just fine. So expect it to spew some errors and show some stuff like this. For the most part, through all of my testing, through the testing that I've seen our testers actually do, the stuff all comes back. So you'll see update, yep, see refresh, still says updating, still wants to do what it's supposed to do to get us back to a state. You can see here we have a Hypercube booted 1.15.11. That's a good sign. And then we'll watch some of these other things start refreshing. And I fully expect that we will see active nodes here. We're also looking for this to change. Any questions while we're waiting for this to downgrade? Is actually what we're seeing.
Luther, there are actually quite a few questions.
Well, I can answer them.
Well, first of all, a lot of people are interested in knowing what is that try dashboard button, which is new in 2.4.
Yes, welcome to our new UI. I actually don't want to click it because I don't want to turn it on and accidentally screw something up during my my demo here. But this is our new UI. We have a wonderful new backend API called lovingly called Steve. And he is now going to be showing our, he's going to be the new backend for our new UI. When this is done, I will click that and we will see what it looks like, because I honestly haven't looked at it either. I'm kind of an old school kind of guy and I like my OG UI. So let's go ahead and click that when we're done. Good question, actually. Is there any?
Yeah, and there are a few questions around if there is any snapshot version compatibility with archive versions. So if you restore, if you have a snapshot which has been taken in an earlier archive version and then you restore it now, will there be any issues there?
So the only issue is so with RKE itself, we were pretty consistent with backwards compatibility. So the version of RKE that gets embedded inside of Rancher ends up being very similar to the versions that we publicly release as a CLI. It is like, I'm like 99% sure that backwards compatibility is there. I think what we were adding is more stuff into that zip file that we create, and there's some more manifesty kind of things that were useful. I think they still work. Like, I think they're all backwards compatible if you're on the latest CLI and you go back. I don't think we made any like super breaking changes in the backup restore stuff. Now let's talk about Rancher. Rancher, a previous version of Rancher, a 2.3 or before, is not going to have the Kubernetes version and the Kubernetes cluster YAML. That is only in 2.4. Let's just show you this while we're waiting. Again, see, this looks pretty ugly. Like, it says like we have a bunch of errors, but it'll probably come up. Let's go to snapshots. I'm going to go here, click on one of these, and say view in the API. So since I wrote this, I know how this works. There is in fact a Kubernetes version. So right here, this is actually physically stored on the CRD that's under the hood inside of the management cluster. If this Kubernetes version is not there, it's taken with an old snapshot. So there's more under the hood besides this. Like, there's stuff that's hidden that's not being displayed by the API. But this is your telltale sign. If a 2.3 cluster took a snapshot, you will only have via the UI. If I clicked here and click restore, you will only have this. These other ones will be grayed out. So that is one of the backwards compatibility issues, which is we did not have the data in prior 2.3. So in 2.4 we do, and we can have these options via the UI. That is a Rancher thing. That is not an RKE thing. RKE is only really doing this etcd snapshot. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that makes sense. And since we're talking about snapshots right now, is there any way we can rename the snapshots or add annotations to them?
Yeah, you can do that, but it's not really very intuitive via the UI. The API can do this if you obviously are if you are an admin on the UI cluster. sorry, on the Rancher management cluster, the local cluster, they have to call it, you can actually edit the CRD. I would like to add some more functionality myself personally to this for the UI. I don't think you can do it here. Yeah, there's no edits, no nothing.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some stuff in there, like you can change the name and things, but actually, no, you can't change the name. That's actually hard coded.
So you can't change the name, but you might be able to add annotations through a kubectl edit or
Yeah,
something.
that's my understanding too. You definitely can add the annotations with this kubectl. Like you can obviously always go to the CRD and do it yourself.
Cool. And how do these snapshots or how are they different than the VM snapshots that are taken on the node? So there's one question where if the nodes take VM level backups, how will that play along with this etcd state?
That's a great question. So a VM level backup is going to be the entire virtual machine, obviously by its name. That is going to include the disk, it's going to include the OS, it's going to include everything. You are going to have this is going to be a lot leaner. This is going to be metadata. It's going to be the etcd, the JSON essentially that's stored inside of the etcd database in a flat file, gzipped up. That's going to be pretty small. It's going to be 2 bits metadata additionally gzipped up, the cluster YAML, which is gzipped and tossed in the PRD, and then it's additionally the Kubernetes version, which is a little name tag. Yeah, it's a lot leaner, going to be quicker. A VM snapshot to me sounds like a lot heavier of a process. Obviously, you need to get to where you need to get to with your infrastructure. If these snapshots aren't going to be ideal for you, I mean, that's fine, do your VM snapshots, but I really like these. They're really clean and quick, and if you edit your cluster and you screw up, it's really nice to get back to a previous state, quickly at least.
Cool. Thanks for going over that. And now coming back, like these are all the questions that we had about snapshots. And now coming back to the cluster state, while restoring, if all the etcd nodes are down, would we still be able to restore to some existing snapshot?
Well, so RKE is going to go out there and it's going to try to make nodes. I mean, what it's doing is it's logging into the box and it's doing things to Docker and making things boot up. My understanding is if you have some of the, I haven't gotten a cluster to this state before, but I think if you have nodes and you have your node pools set up and you have everything configured as it was before, it should be able to try to boot things up. I mean, this is a quick example. By the way, look, if no one noticed, it did actually downgrade us. And with our node pool functionality, I mean, it's very easy for me to just click a button and boot up another node. I mean, I don't see why RKE could not recover from some of those things that you just discussed. It should, from my understanding of what it's doing.
Yep, I guess that's all the questions that we have for now.
That's it, huh? Okay. Well, we all saw that downgrade, so that's cool. We just saw node pool functionality. That was something that came into 3.
Sorry, I spoke too soon. I have one last question.
Oh.
So another user is asking if you can create a new cluster from a snapshot. So not restoring it to the same cluster, but creating just a new cluster from an existing snapshot. Is that possible?
Yeah, we do not have a restore to new cluster functionality, but from what I understand, we have the data, the stuff is in there. I don't actually feel like that would be far off for us to accomplish. The cluster
We would need
YAML.
to change a few things.
Pardon?
We would need to change a few things in the API to make it work.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I feel too. Like there's a couple of modifications, but like with a cluster YAML, the Kubernetes version, yeah, I don't see why we need much more in the backup. I mean, we can kind of do some stuff with it.
Okay. And is there a way we can schedule snapshots like on a daily or a weekly
That's
basis?
exactly what I wanted to go over. Great question. Okay, so these are the configurations. So I actually talked about them, but I didn't show you them. This here is, again, so I edited the cluster. You can see we have our node pools up here. All the way down here under advanced, usually this is rolled down or rolled up. You roll it down and you will see etcd snapshot backup target. So this is local, like I was discussing, which is going to the local file system. This is S3. You can put in your bucket names, regions, etc., keys. This is per cluster. So if you have 10 clusters, you can put it S3 backups into 10 different buckets if you want to. And also, if anybody knows how to use the API, you can speed up that process. You have 10 clusters, you can write a process to hit the API 10 times and write the same configurations to all of them. It's pretty easy to manage. And then you go down here and we have the recurring etcd snapshots enabled. I have them turned on here. As you can see, these are not grayed out. Hit no, it'll turn that off, obviously. Yes, you will have the interval, how many hours you'd like to wait between snapshots, 1 being the minimum, obviously. And then we have a total number of snapshots that you would like to retain, so that you have, let's say, what this means here is we will keep 6 snapshots. If we make a 7th, we will delete the oldest one, if that makes sense. So, like I was discussing before, if you wanted a snapshot every 4 hours and you wanted to keep 10 of them, then when you make an 11th, then the original first one will drop off and you would now have 10 again. So those are the configurations for what makes the RK CLI obviously would be more of a scripting tool. You could do cron jobs, things like this. The UI here through Rancher makes this a little bit nicer, neater, and you can use the UI to do this. And this is also, like I said, configurable. This is all API-able. Like all these things are in the API. If you want to go and mess with it, I will click here and do a view an API. And I'm pretty sure I do S3. Yeah, like you'll see that you can just hit the API and change some of these parameters if you're motivated. Any more questions?
Just going through them one by one.
Well, let me.
Yeah.
I'll pull up my wrap-up slide then, and we'll see if any more questions pop up, because I think that will at least get us to.
So one of the questions is not related to the snapshot feature, but about the CIS scan option. I guess that's a new feature coming in. Can you show the CIS scan option in our edit cluster?
I can show you. I can't actually talk to it too much. I just know what a CIS scan is. I don't know too much what's going on here. Well, I can probably infer though. So this is a CIS scan, and the idea here would be to run it on a cron job. And we do have a whole UI for this, by the way, I'm pretty sure. Oh, and I promised I'd hit that button too. Let me do that before we're done. This is the CIS scan area, and it's very similar to how we do snapshots. You can schedule them, run them, and then there's going to be an output here for what they did. This is what I remember about it when I saw the demo for this tool. I don't know exactly what a CIS scan goes through. Like, I don't know the details of each one, but I know there's like a step-by-step process for it to check to make sure that you have actually done things to your cluster to harden it for CIS. I don't know what the acronym stands for. Something in information security? I don't know. But it's an InfoSec thing, right? The InfoSec guys want to make sure that your clusters are hardened and that you have deployed something that will stand the test of hackers, et cetera. That's what the CIS scans are for, and it's an automated way for us to let you do some testing against your cluster. Let's go back to those configurations. Actually, I probably did that a little too fast. You'll see here you can put it on a cron job for how often you want to do it. And then there's permissive and hardened, I guess. CIS 1.4, I believe, is a spec. I think there's a 1.5, maybe 1.6 also, but 1.4 seems to be what we are supporting right here. And that is that's the basics. I hope that at least makes sense. I'm not sure I could talk to it more than that, to be honest with you. So I'm going to hit the button to break everything. Sorry, guys, but
yeah, a lot of people want you to do that, so
let's do it. Let's go. No, that didn't work out, did it? That's a bummer. Let's see if I. That's the old one. I don't have the button anymore. Is this the new one? It's not the new one. This looks like the old one. Try dashboard. You know what? I know what it is. I don't think I have the experimental features turned on. Here, watch this. I think I can do it. Let's just do this.
Rajeshri, do you have a setup where you can go and try the dashboard?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I have the 242 image running on a cluster, so I can show that.
Yep.
No, I suppose it's, yeah, go. I'll stop sharing. So, by the way, this is where you would see that, by the way, this feature flag dashboard. By the way, I probably did that fast. Global right here, then there's settings, and then there's feature flags. And it says it's on. I'm on my local host, guys. I'm sorry. I guess I can't get it done, but guess who's going to show you? I'm going to stop sharing. I don't know how to do that. How do we stop sharing? There it is. Stop showing screen and take it away.
Okay. Oh yeah, now I can show my screen. Okay, everyone can see my screen? I think so.
Yeah, we can.
So on a cluster, you can click on Try Dashboard, the button everyone has been waiting for. Yeah. And over here, you have drop downs in which you can check the resources such as namespaces. To be honest, even I'm exploring it, like I haven't explored it entirely. Yeah, so this is the new Steve UI that we have put together. And I think like over here also you can import YAML to create a new namespace, and the same goes for other resources such as workloads. I told you that I had launched a sample application in my cluster, so that shows up here. Okay, yeah, so it also shows the API services that have been registered and the CRDs that Rancher has created. Apart from that, you can click on each of these drop downs to see like each section in detail. Yeah, I mean, is there anything in particular that users want to see next?
There was so this is great, but there's also a question about backups, which I'll answer while people might ask questions about the dashboard. Someone asked if there is an impact to workloads when restoring a backup, and I can definitely say, yeah, like if you would have snapshotted something, added more workloads, done things to your cluster, and then restored, like this new stuff that you added, it's going to be gone. It's going to be a snapshot from that time that you took it. And as far as zero downtime thing is related, no, it pretty much just flushes and pushes you back to where you were. So you're not going to have a zero downtime atomic rollback. That's not how that's designed. I hope that answers your question. I don't see anybody.
Yeah. I can also just wanted to point out that if you want to go back to using the current UI, you can click on back to Rancher and it will take you to this UI. And I can stop sharing my screen, Luther, so that you can again,
wrap-up slide, that old thing. We have two more questions. I'm just read real quick before I share. Oh, yeah, someone got the same error I did with the UI. You got to turn on Steve and do some other things. Like it's not perfect. It's experimental. Sorry. Where's my slides? All right, here we go. So I did my demo. That was cool. All right, so here's our questions period where we already are. I am going to show you really quickly a quick overview of what came in 2.4. So if you do not actually, if you're a 2.3 user and you have not gone to 2.4, here's some good ideas about what's there if you haven't looked at it. So zero downtime upgrades, like we have just discussed in this presentation. Atomic cluster rollbacks, like we just discussed in the presentation, and these other things. There's also more. This is actually kind of the high level. So there's some things that we can talk to. There's it's a quite big team we have now at Rancher. We've grown considerably and we're very proud of that. But that also means that we don't know everything. So you're asking a couple people who worked on the zero downtime upgrades and the atomic cluster rollbacks. I touched the CIS scanning a little bit because I helped the DevOps guy with it, and I know about scale improvements. I did some auth enhancements, but the other stuff I might not be able to answer questions about. But feel free to ask them. We're here. We have time, and we're available. So that's all I have. Connie, if you'd like to start doing some emceeing again, we can also answer questions and see where we go. There's a question here. Are there any place to check a cluster name and the project ID in any point in the UI? I thought I showed that. Is that not what we would consider? I mean, this is the cluster name. I'm hoping I'm answering the question for this guy. Can you check the cluster name and project ID? Are you talking about the UI maybe? Or are you talking about the API?
Yeah, he's talking about UI, but I don't think the project IDs are available in the UI, mostly API. Maybe you can just show the view in API.
Maybe you would do it right here, talking about these guys, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's just talk about this in general. If nobody knows this, the UI sits on top of our API, and our API does all the work. So if you don't have something in the UI or you need something, go to the API. If you don't have something in the API that you need, you have access to the Kubernetes underlying cluster, go to kubectl. Like, just go ahead and grab that stuff. I wouldn't change a lot of stuff via kubectl in a production cluster, but if you're just testing things, I do it all the time locally because there's stuff I don't care about, and I'll just throw it away and restart it. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy to get to this data and see what's going on. I mean, it's not like we're trying to hide a bunch of information from you. So yeah, the API is always available. If you see a drop down or the ... drop down like this, view API on all this stuff, see what we're storing, see what's in here, and browse around. I mean, you can go here and see every one of these. Our API browser is pretty slick. You can click on these guys and see the projects, and it'll get you around. You can go, I mean, principles, there's all this stuff is in here. I hope that's a better understanding of what you're looking for.
All right, it looks like we're at the top of the hour here. We could probably take maybe one more question if you guys are available. Kinara, I don't know if you had one lined up there.
No, I think that's it from the question side.
All right. Well, thank you, Luther, Rajashri, and Kinara, and thank you all for joining us today. Like I said, this session was recorded, and we will be sending the slides out to you guys in the next day or so. If you are available tomorrow, I did want to share that we do have another masterclass featuring Tigera tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern. So head over to rancher.com/trainings to sign up, and we will talk to everybody soon. Thank you and have a good day.